You're listening to the VSL Aviation Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Lake, and this is episode 17. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching on YouTube. If you're doing that format, I really appreciate it. I know it's been a little bit since my last episode. This is the busy season for flight training and DPEs especially, so I've been given a lot of check rides all over the country. And finally making it around to what will be one of the last episodes of our Commercial Airman Certification Standards review. So if you've listened to any of my podcasts or watched any of the videos, you know that this show is all about helping you be prepared for your check ride. The document that you're going to use on your check ride is called the Airman Certification Standards, the ACS, and you can find that if you have ForeFlight, you can find it there. You can find it online. If you just search for Commercial Pilot ACS, that should come up with the FAA document. But anyway, this document is what I'm using as a flight examiner to conduct a check ride. So we've already reviewed. You'll have to excuse me, there's a fly buzzing around here. I've already reviewed area of operations 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that takes care of our the oral or the ground portion of the check ride and the takeoffs and landings. And so now we're going to do area of operations 5 through 11. That sounds like a lot, but we're actually going to skip area of operation 10 because that's multi-engine procedures only. There's a lot of area of operation 9, which is emergency procedures, that we're going to skip over because, again, that's multi-engine only, and we're focusing on the single-engine commercial check ride. So those multi-engine stuff, that'll be the next series of episodes, will be the multi-engine rating. So don't worry, I'm going to cover those as well. All right, so without any further ado, we'll get right into it. I have the ACS, Area of Operation 5, pulled up right now. This is for performance and ground reference maneuvers. Now, the first one that we're going to cover is Task A, and that's steep turns. Now, steep turns has 5 skills listed. Remember, you have to demonstrate proficiency in all of the skills listed for that task if it's applicable to your airplane. And in this case, we don't see an airplane single-engine land, single-engine sea, multi-engine land, multi-engine sea. That's not specified. So when it's not specified for the category or class, that is, category and class, then it's applicable to all types of aircraft. So everybody's going to have to do steep turns. Skill 1 here is clear the area. Make sure you're clearing the area. I covered this in my pre-flight briefing, but what I'll say as a flight examiner is, hey, let's start with steep turns. Now, you being the pilot in command at this point, it's your job to execute those steep turns safely, and that includes clearing the area. So make sure you do clearing turns. S2, establish the manufacturer's recommended airspeed, or if one is not available, an airspeed not to exceed VA. So we'll probably have that discussion either in the aircraft or in the pre-flight of what is the aircraft's VA, and we're not going to exceed that during this steep turn maneuver. S3, roll into a coordinated 360-degree steep turn with approximately 50 degrees of bank. So it's important that you and your instructor become really familiar with what 50 degrees looks like, because on a standard attitude indicator, the 50-degree mark isn't marked. There's a 45-degree bank on all standard attitude indicators, and there's a 60-degree bank mark, but there's not a line on your attitude indicator for 50 degrees. So you're going to have to get practiced of seeing that and really feeling it. When I teach this maneuver, I make sure that you know that there's a certain amount of load factor associated with a 50-degree bank level turn. So you should be able to feel those G forces. About 1.5 G's on there should be enough. Anyway, S4, perform the task in the opposite direction. So this is where you're going to roll straight into or from a right turn directly to a left, or from a left directly into the right. So it says perform the task in the opposite direction. Maintain entry altitude plus or minus 100 feet, airspeed plus or minus 10 knots, bank plus or minus 5 degrees, and roll out on a heading, entry heading plus or minus 10 degrees. So those are our objective standards there. Now I've put in some custom notes in that reference back to Appendix 7. So in Appendix 7, which we're going to get into the appendices here, but just so you know, during the check ride for performance and ground reference maneuvers for single engine land, we have to do task A, steep turns, or task B, steep spiral. So we kind of have the option here. And we'll go into those probably on a follow-up episode after this, where we'll cover kind of the administrative stuff and how we're conducting this check ride. But that's just a note for reference there. Now, in my handy-dandy hyperlinked ACS document here, I actually have a reference back to Chapter 10, which covers all our performance maneuvers. The first one it talks about is steep turns. So that's the Airplane Flying Handbook, Chapter 10, is where you'll find performance maneuvers there. All right, moving right along, we have Task B, which is the steep spiral. This is for airplane single-engine land and single-engine sea only. You can see that because it's in the parentheses there for Task B. We have 6 skills to demonstrate for this. So skill 1, clear the area. Sounds familiar, right? Skill 2, select an altitude sufficient to continue through a series of at least 3 360-degree turns. Skill 3, establish and maintain a steep spiral not to exceed 60 degrees angle of bank to maintain a constant radius about a suitable ground reference point. Skill 4, apply wind drift correction to track a constant radius circle around selected reference point with bank not to exceed 60 degrees at steepest point in turn. Skill 5, divide attention between aircraft control, traffic avoidance, and the ground track while maintaining coordinated flight. And Skill 6, maintain the specified airspeed plus or minus 10 knots and roll out toward an object or specified heading plus or minus 10 degrees and complete the maneuver no lower than 1,500 feet AGL. So those are our six skills there for the steep spiral. Some things I'd like to highlight about the steep spiral is this is most useful a maneuver to master if you have some sort of engine failure event and you're gliding towards a suitable landing surface. You don't want to give up altitude though. So if I was, let's say 10 miles, let's say I was 5 miles south of Russellville Airport here, and I was up at 10,000 feet. I'm going to glide directly to the airport, and I'll probably arrive over the airport at 6,000 to 8,000 feet, depending on the airplane I'm flying. Much too high to start a traffic pattern, so I'm going to start a steep spiral and just slowly spiral down, staying over my desired landing point, and I'm going to complete the maneuver at about 1,500 feet AGL, ideally on a left or right downwind, kind of a beam my touchdown point. And so the steep spiral is meant to transition into kind of a power off 180 type of event, where you're now in the Air Force we'd call it an emergency landing pattern, an ELP. And that's really what the steep spiral is a way to get you to a key position in your power off or emergency landing pattern, which is typically going to be either overhead your touchdown point or beam your touchdown point, where you make a 180-degree turn and land power off. So the goal of this maneuver, it's not some sort of circus trick that we're asking you to do to show mastery of the aircraft. I mean, it is that. We're seeing that you have mastery of aircraft by being able to complete the maneuver. But what it's really about is your ability to fly to a landing point, spiral down over that, and then affect a landing on that landing point. So a lot of times I'll combine this maneuver, the steep spiral, with a power off landing to a simulated either power off landing in a field where we'll abort that at around 500 or 600 feet, or to an actual runway. We have some kind of non-busy airports here. This is great to practice over an airport that isn't very busy, and you can just spiral down. You get your 3 turns. That's a critical point, is 3 turns. That's probably where most people make an error on here, is they choose an altitude that's not high enough and they only get 2 turns. Well, the skills says specifically at least 3 turns. So err a little bit high, right? Because if you get 4 or you get 3.5, that's fine, but we need at least 3 turns. So that's steep spirals. Next are Shondells. That's task C. We have 8 skill sets in this task. Skill 1, clear the area. Sounds familiar, right? Skill 2, select an altitude that allow the maneuver to be performed no lower than 1,500 feet above the ground. Skill 3, establish appropriate entry configuration, power, and airspeed. Skill 4, establish the angle of bank approximately 30 degrees. Skill 5, simultaneously apply power and pitch to maintain a smooth, coordinated climbing turn in either direction to the 90-degree point with a constant bank and continuously decreasing airspeed. Skill 6, begin a coordinated constant rate rollout from the 90-degree point to the 180-degree point, maintaining that airspeed momentarily to avoid stall. And Skill 8, resume a straight and level flight with minimum altitude loss. So those are our 8 skills for the Shondell. Again, Airplane Flying Handbook Chapter 10 has performance maneuvers, which includes the Shondell. I've got a link to it here on the document, so you just click here, or you just go to Chapter 10 in your AFH. I've made this hyperlink document. Eventually, I'm going to have it available probably on a Patreon site where at a certain dollar a month level, you'll have access to all of these hyperlink documents. I'm not really ready to release that yet, but stay tuned. So Chapter 10 here, you could go in and find that our Shondells, let's see, are on page 10-4 of the Airplane Flying Handbook. So Chapter 10 there. Okay, next up are lazy 8s. This is task D, and it's applicable only to single-engine land and single-engine sea. There are 6 skills here, and there's actually more than that because we have some subcategories of skill 5, it looks like. We have A, B, C, D, and E of 5. Yeah, well, let's just go through those. So skill 1, clear the area. Skill 2, select an altitude that will allow the maneuver to be performed no lower than 1,500 feet AGL. Seeing a trend here. Skill 3, establish the recommended entry configuration, power, and airspeed. Skill 4, maintain coordinated flight throughout the maneuver. Skill 5, complete the maneuver in accordance with the following: approximately 30 degrees of bank at the steepest point, constant change of pitch and roll rate and airspeed, attitude at 180-degree point plus or minus 100 feet from the entry altitude, airspeed at the 180-degree point plus or minus 10 knots from the entry airspeed, and heading at the 180-degree point plus or minus 10 degrees. And then skill 6, continue the maneuver through the number of symmetrical loops specified, then resume straight and level flight. So if you haven't practiced these yet, the lazy 8 is basically a S-turn with a vertical component. So it's kind of a 3-dimensional S-turn. And so at each 180-degree point, we want to be very close to our entry, 180 degrees out from our entry heading, but our same entry airspeed and entry altitude, while in between those two turns we've done this big vertical turn. So I'm sure Chapter 10 has a good picture here. It kind of helps us visualize it right there, the lazy 8. It's on 10-6. So you can see it's kind of an S turn with vertical. We've got the plane going up and down, making 180-degree turns. It's one of my favorite maneuvers to do or to teach, because I think the lazy 8s really are the best maneuver for you to master energy management, because really you shouldn't be jockeying with power that much or at all. You should be able to do the maneuvers successfully and within these tolerances without ever having to touch the power, and you're managing everything with pitch and bank. It's a very fun maneuver to do, I think. We actually would do kind of an aerobatic version of this, kind of wing over in the Air Force, and it was a lot of fun to do, where you're actually getting a 90 degrees angle of bank. Again, that's not the goal here. Feel free to do that if you had appropriately certified airplane and you had an aerobatic box or a safe area to do this. That'd be a lot of fun to do in like a super decathlon. When I'm teaching aerobatics, this is one of the first maneuvers that I do, kind of lazy 8s, but we do them at the 90-degree bank instead of 30 degrees of bank. But it's a fun maneuver to do, even with this 30 degrees of bank. It should be just a nice, lazy maneuver, right? It's not a lot of, you're not in the Top Gun movie here, right? You're just you're just letting the energy carry you through these turns, and then you're aiming for that specific heading and airspeed and altitude points to be within tolerance there. So that is lazy 8. Our next task is 8s on pylons. This has 8 tasks, or 8 skills, that is. Skill 1, clear the area. Skill 2, determine the approximate pivotal altitude. Skill 3, select suitable pylons that will permit straight and level flight between the pylons. Skill 4, enter the maneuver in the correct direction and position using the appropriate altitude and airspeed. Skill 5, establish the correct bank angle for the conditions not to exceed 40 degrees of bank. Skill 6, apply smooth and continuous corrections so that the line of sight reference line remains on the pylon. Skill 7, divide attention between accurate coordinated airplane control and outside visual references. Skill 8, maintain pylon position using appropriate pivotal altitude, avoiding slips and skids. So 8 skills here for the 8s on pylons. This is kind of one of the dreaded maneuvers, I'd say. It's one of the more difficult ones to master. Not that it's incredibly difficult, it's a lot different from anything that you've done before. Some common errors that I see on this one is getting it confused with turns around a point. We're not really worried about the same thing we're worried about on a turn around a point, where we're not trying to change altitudes on a turn around a point, and our bank angle is going to vary pretty significantly on a turn around a point. For 8s on pylons, the bank angle is going to change, but so is the altitude a little bit. And our airspeed could fluctuate slightly, right? Depending on our ground speed, our pivotal altitude is going to change. So Chapter 10 covers the performance maneuvers, but 8s on pylons are actually in Chapter 7 at the end of the ground reference maneuvers. So you would have to go to your airplane flying handbook, Chapter 7. That's where you'll find your ground reference maneuvers. And at the end of that, that's where it's going to talk about your 8s on pylons, and it'll give you the calculation you should be familiar with. Let's see, right here. Yeah, square of the ground speed, then divide by 15, or 11.3, depending on if your ground speed's in knots or miles per hour. So it gives you some common airspeeds here. So let's talk about this for a second, because what I've had happen before in a check ride is during the check ride, we're at a low altitude, because pivotal altitude's usually below 1,000 feet or somewhere around there. So we're at a relatively low altitude. We've either cleared the area or we've just finished another maneuver, and I asked for 8s on pylons, and the applicant pulls out a calculator and starts to actively calculate the 8s on pylon, the pivotal altitude using that equation we just discussed. I'm not going to give you a disapproval for that, but it's probably not the best time in the world to pull out a calculator and start doing, basic algebra or whatever that is. What would probably be better is for you to have an idea based on the area that we're going to be flying, which you know ahead of time, right? Before we go out to the airplane, the general, altitude of the ground we're flying over as far as MSL altitudes. So you should be able to come up, before we go to the airplane, let me rephrase that. You should come up with an approximate pivotal altitude before we even get in the airplane. It's great that you know how to calculate that equation, but you're not showing me really anything as an examiner that I'm looking for there. I'm looking for good aeronautical decision making, which means not having to do calculus in the airplane with a calculator. It's knowing to do that ahead of time and having that already figured out and written down somewhere. So when we get out to the airplane, hey, my pivotal altitude's approximately 800 feet, so that's where we're going to start. Perfect. That's a good answer. So maybe just some gamesmanship on how you're accomplishing this during the check ride. Of course, this maneuver just takes practice. I can't sit here and give you a lecture on how best to do 8s on pylons. You need to go out and practice this in the airplane. This is a little more of kind of on that spectrum of towards a circus trick, kind of a check ride trick. It seems like it's useless, but it's actually very helpful for me as an examiner and for your instructor, for you to demonstrate that you have mastery of the airplane. Because while you're doing this maneuver, you're having to fly the airplane in coordinated condition without really looking at your instruments, which is something that I'm concerned about, because if you're reliant, if you're kind of locked on those instruments, that could be indicative of you not having mastery of the airplane. You're basically flying, you're treating the airplane like a video game. And the 8s on pylons maneuver forces you to move your head outside the cockpit at kind of an odd angle, right? You're looking off to the left or to the right, and you're still having to fly a coordinated airplane. So this really does a good job of showing mastery of the aircraft. So I like this maneuver. All right, we're on to navigation. This is skill 6. And the first task here is pilotage and dead reckoning. We can find navigation information in Chapter 16 of the Pilot Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. I've got that linked right there. So Chapter 16 is where we're pulling this from. Our first one, pilotage and dead reckoning, this is task A, and it has 7 skills. So skill 1, prepare and use a flight log. Navigate by pilotage. Navigate by means of pre-computed headings, ground speeds, and elapsed time. Use the magnetic direction indicator in navigation to include turns to headings. Verify position within 2 nautical miles of the flight plan route. Arrive at an en route checkpoint within 3 minutes of the initial or revised estimated time of arrival and provide a destination estimate. Maintain, and skill 7, maintain selected altitude plus or minus 100 feet and heading plus or minus 10 degrees. So some of these items we're going to cover in the ground. I'm going to ask for your nav log before we even go to the airplane. Then you're going to be able to use dead reckoning and pilotage. So pilotage, looking out the window, dead reckoning, that's your pre-computed headings, ground speeds, and elapsed time. You need to do both of those to verify your position within 2 miles within 3 minutes. So that's kind of plus or minus 3 minutes, plus or minus 2 miles. Those are the objective standards here, plus or minus 100 feet, of course, and plus or minus 10 degrees of heading. Pretty basic. This is a lot like what we covered in the private pilot. It's just, I believe the private pilot was 3 miles in 5 minutes. This is 2 miles in 3 minutes. Task B, navigation systems and radar services. We have 7 skills here as well. Skill 1, use an airborne electronic navigation system. Skill 2, determine the airplane's position using the navigation system. Skill 3, intercept and track a given course, radial, or bearing as appropriate. Skill 4, recognize and describe the indication of station or waypoint passage if appropriate. Skill 5, recognize loss or interference and take appropriate action if applicable. Skill 6, use proper communication procedures when utilizing radar services. Skill 7, maintain the appropriate altitude plus or minus 100 feet plus or minus 10 degrees. So this is an interesting one here. An airborne electronic navigation system. That could be a GPS. A lot of times it is. It could be a VOR. It could be an NDB. A lot of times it's a GPS nowadays. So I'll say, hey, using all available resources, I need you to divert to XYZ airport. That may be kind of the scenario that I give in the airplane. I think a lot of other examiners will do something like that. They may explain a condition saying that you look ahead and you see a really big thunderstorm that appears to be over your destination. It's summertime. It's developed pretty rapidly. And it's kind of this widespread event that you can see out front. Your VMC right now, but you're definitely going to need to divert. And ATC tells you that this airport over here is the one you need to go to. So that may be the time that I ask you to, well, you can use all your available resources. So plug that into your GPS and give me an ETA, estimated fuel burn. We're kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone here, because our next task is diversion, where you're going to have to give me some specific stuff on how to divert, and I may want you to use, or it may be prudent for you to use, the your airborne electronic navigation system to do that. So that's what you can expect with Task B. That kind of rolls right into Task C, which is diversion. There are 5 skills with this. Skill 1, select a suitable destination or route for diversion. Skill 2, make a reasonable estimate of heading, ground speed, arrival time, and fuel consumption to the divert airport. Skill 3, maintain the appropriate altitude plus or minus 100 feet plus or minus 10 degrees. Skill 4, update, interpret weather in flight. Skill 5, utilize flight deck displays of digital weather and aeronautical information as applicable. So again, the diversion and the navigation, and so task B and C, they work really well together. So those are kind of be combined, because I want you to use all the resources that you have on the flight deck, be it ForeFlight, your Garmin, the Garmin 430 and 530 series. They have the waypoint information where you can pull up weather if the plane's equipped. You can, even if the plane's not equipped with the weather, you can pull up waypoint information to find frequencies for ACOS. If it's an airport that you don't know the ACOS to, that's a quick way to find that. You can find runway lengths and distances, altitude of the airport. Some critical information is in that 430. Of course, it's in the 650, the Avidyne systems, the 540 and the 550. Those have the same types of information in them. And then if you don't have that stuff on your airplane, you have it on ForeFlight, right? Which I really, again, recommend that you use and be very comfortable with going into this check ride. If you're not a ForeFlight user, you're like, no, man, I just want to do everything paper. Hey, that's fine, but this information is going to be calculated either by giving a really good estimate or by you actually breaking out a plotter and E6B in flight, which that's going to be more difficult than using ForeFlight for sure, especially in a single pilot environment. So I would recommend having some sort of EFB and also a backup, because another thing that I might present during the check ride is like, oh, well, it's great that you're using your iPad and ForeFlight to estimate the diversion to this airport, but guess what? Your iPad just overheated and you can't use that anymore. So do you have an appropriate backup, which could be another iPad? It could be your cell phone that has ForeFlight loaded on it. That's completely acceptable to me as long as you have a backup. Loss procedures. Task D. We have 4 skills here. Skill 1, use an appropriate method to determine position. Skill 2, maintain an appropriate heading and climb as necessary. Skill 3, identify prominent landmarks. And Skill 4, use navigation systems, facilities, or contact an ATC facility for assistance. So a lot of times this loss procedure is kind of verbally debriefed during the diversion. If you can't find your divert field, or say, hey, simulated, we have this low overcast layer that we're flying over, so we cannot see the ground. Maybe your GPS doesn't work. What's another way you could find that? We're just going to have that verbal discussion in kind of a scenario-based mindset in the plane to cover this. All right, we're going to go on to Area of Operation 7, slow flight and stalls. Maintaining aircraft control, airplane flying handbook is in chapter 5 of the airplane flying handbook. That's where you're going to cover slow flight and stalls and spin awareness. So I've got that linked here on the bottom for chapter 5 there. On task A, this is maneuvering during slow flight. We have 5 skills. Skill 1 is clear the area. Skill 2, select an entry altitude that will allow the task to be completed no lower than 1,500 feet AGL or 3,000 feet for airplane multi-engine. So single engine 1,500, multi-engine 3,000. Skill 3, establish and maintain an airspeed at which any further increase in angle of attack, increase in load factor, or reduction in power would result in a stall warning. Skill 4, accomplish coordinated straight and level flight turns, climbs, and descents with the aircraft configured as specified by the evaluator without a stall warning. Skill 5, maintain the specified altitude plus or minus 50 feet, specified heading plus or minus 10 degrees, airspeed plus 5 minus 0 knots, and a specified angle of bank plus or minus 5 degrees. So those are our objective standards here. It's basic slow flight. This hasn't really changed from your private pilot days or the private pilot ACS really. It's very, very similar. So we want to maintain a safe altitude. We want to configure it appropriately, fly around in slow flight without getting the stall horn. That's the basic gist of this one. Skill or task B is power off stalls. We have 10 skills here. Skill 1, clear the area. Skill 2, select an entry altitude, same as before, 1,500 feet for single or 3,000 feet for multi. Configure the airplane in approach or landing configuration as specified by the evaluator, and maintain coordinated flight throughout the maneuver. Skill 4, establish a stabilized descent. Skill 5, transition smoothly from the approach or landing attitude to a pitch attitude that will induce a stall. Skill 6, maintain a specified heading plus or minus 10 degrees if in straight flight. Maintain a specified angle of bank not to exceed 20 degrees plus or minus 5 degrees if in turning flight, until an impending or full stall occurs as specified by the evaluator. Skill 7, acknowledge the cues of first indication of stall. Skill 8, recover at the first indication of stall or after a full stall has occurred as specified by the evaluator. Skill 9, configure the airplane as recommended by the manufacturer and accelerate to VX or VY. Skill 10, return to the altitude, heading, and airspeed specified by the evaluator. So, power off stalls. I really wish we could change the name of this and call this the landing stall. I would like to call all the stalls traffic pattern stalls, so TP stalls. Power off stalls are just your landing stalls. So you're going to configure the airplane for landing. You're even going to establish a descent. A lot of times us evaluators will say, hey, pretend that road down there is the runway. I want you to turn base to that runway. And while you're turning base, I want you to induce a power off stall and recover. It's kind of a standard scenario that I would give to test this task right here, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to test is that you have the ability to recognize and recover from a stall that occurs during a traffic pattern or an approach to landing. So that's the goal of the power off stall. It's a lot of common error here is to just do this as like we're doing it in a vacuum, where we don't ever get that 500 foot a minute or stabilized descent going first. Remember, we got to get that stabilized descent going, simulating that we're landing, and then do the stall. We can do it either straight ahead, we can do it turning, and then we can do it to a full stall or first indication, however the examiner chooses to do that. Power on stall. Again, wish it was called a traffic pattern stall, and this would be the takeoff and departure stall, not the power on stall. But anyway, we got we have 10 skills here for task C. So skill 1 is clear the area. Skill 2, safe altitude, 15 or 3,000. Skill 3, establish takeoff, departure, or cruise configuration as specified by the evaluator and maintain coordinated flight. Skill 4, set power to no less than 65% power. Skill 5, transition smoothly from takeoff or departure attitude to the pitch attitude that will induce a stall. Skill 6, maintain specified heading plus or minus 10 degrees. If in straight flight, plus or minus 20 degrees, or 20 degrees plus or minus 10 degrees if in turning flight until a pending or full stall is reached as specified by the evaluator. Skill 7, acknowledge the cues at the first indication of a stall. Skill 8, recover at first indication or full stall as specified by the evaluator. Skill 9, configure the airplane recommended by the manufacturer and accelerate to VX or VY. And Skill 10, return to the altitude, heading, and airspeed as specified by the evaluator. All right, so this is our takeoff departure. We can do it in the cruise configuration as well. And one thing I'll highlight here is it says no less than 65% power. A lot of the smaller airplanes like the 172s and Warriors or Cherokees will always do this at full power. When you transition, especially to multi-engine aircraft or anything high performance, and the ACS actually talks about this in one of the appendices, is not to use full power because you'll get really, really nose high, and it can be quite dangerous. And not dangerous per se, but it can just put the plane in an unusual attitude, and it would be very easy to induce a spin from those attitudes. So we're going to use lower power settings on higher performance airplanes so we don't get extremely nose high. And if you're flying an airplane, like we've got a 172 that has an upgraded 180 horsepower engine with a constant speed prop, if you do power on stalls on that full power, it will really be pretty aggressively nose high and get a little uncomfortable. So that's where we might back the power off to about 70%, 65% power. The higher the performance airplane, it might be as little as 50% power to get a nose attitude that's safe, especially in a twin. So just some items of note there. Next is accelerated stalls. This is task D. We have 9 skills here. Skill 1, clear the area. Skill 2, select our altitude. This is no lower than 3,000 feet. Notice that it doesn't specify between single and multi, 3,000 feet. Establish configuration is specified by the evaluator. Set power appropriate for the configuration such that airspeed does not exceed VA or any other applicable POH limitation. Skill 5, establish and maintain coordinated turn, 45 degrees of bank, increasing elevator back pressure smoothly until an impending stall is reached. Skill 6, acknowledge the cues and recover promptly at the first indication of an impending stall. Skill 7, execute stall recovery in accordance with the procedures set forth in the POH. Skill 8, configure the airplane as recommended by the manufacturer and accelerate to VX or VY. Skill 9, return to the altitude, heading, and airspeed specified by the evaluator. So accelerated stalls, this is a new stall we didn't do as a private pilot that we're doing as a commercial pilot. We're going to do this in our CFI as well, and also our ATP. But the accelerated stall is really a G stall. We're causing the airplane to stall because we're adding load factor to it. And our stall increases by the square root of the load factor. So this is something that I teach all my private pilot and commercial pilot students, is that correlation between load factor, or G's, and our stall speed. And so we're just demonstrating that the plane can stall at any airspeed here. That's really what we're doing. You've heard that before from your instructor, I'm sure, that, an airplane stalls at a critical angle of attack, not an airspeed. So in an accelerated stall, we can increase our stalling speed by increasing load factor. And we're not going to take this to a full stall. We're going to take this just to the first indication. So it's going to be kind of a rapid onset, and we'll hear the stall horn or see the stall light or feel the buffet, and we're going to immediately release back pressure, and we'll immediately recover. As soon as you release back pressure, your stall speed drops. You get further away from stall speed, and you lose that stall indication. So it's a pretty quick maneuver. If you've never done it before, it's basically like trying to do steep turns with a low power setting, and that'll induce an accelerated stall. Task E, spin awareness. There are no skills here. There aren't. There used to be. You used to have to spin on your commercial check ride. Not in any time I've been flying, but I hear the old timers say that. Old timers. I'm just making fun of you guys. But yeah, you used to have to spin during your commercial check ride. You don't have to do that now. In fact, you don't even have to have the spin endorsement. You don't officially have to have spin training until you've gone for your CFI. I would recommend going out and getting spin training. I think it's really good. So it's just, we're going to have a discussion of, hey, what could cause a spin in this situation? And if we were to get into a spin, how would you recover? You need to know that. You need to get spin training too. Go out and get spin training. It's a lot of fun. It's one of those fun sign-offs to do. You go up, you take the afternoon, you do some ground school, do some unusual attitudes and spins, maybe some aerobatics. It was a lot of fun. All right, that brings us to a conclusion of Area of Operation 7. So Area of Operation 8 is supplemental or high altitude operations. And I believe we just have 2 tasks here. Yep, 2 tasks. Task A is supplemental oxygen. We have 3 skills. These are, so the 3 skills: determine the quantity of supplemental oxygen required in a scenario given by the evaluator. Skill 2, operator simulate operation of installed or portable oxygen equipment in the airplane. Skill 3, brief passengers on use of supplemental equipment in a scenario given by the evaluator. So these 3 skills, again, you're more than likely the plane that we're flying isn't equipped with oxygen systems, so we've covered this in the oral. That might continue in our pre-flight and our passenger briefing. Well, I'll just ask, if we were equipped with oxygen, or if we were planning on flying at 14,000 feet today, how would that passenger brief be any different? So that's how we're going to handle that. Pressurization, operate the pressure, that's task B. We have 3 skills again. Operate the pressurization system if equipment is stalled. Skill 2, respond appropriately to simulated pressurization malfunctions if equipment is installed. And skill 3, brief passengers on use of supplemental oxygen in the case of pressurization malfunctions if equipment is stalled. So this is one where it's not really applicable if you're in an airplane that doesn't have a pressurization system. We may ask about that in the oral, but if you don't have your high altitude endorsement, I'm not going to test you on this because you haven't necessarily been trained to, I guess, check ride standards on how a pressurization system works. Now, if you bring an airplane that is pressurized, we're most definitely going to cover these items. So if you bring some sort of pressurized piston, or if we're doing it in a turboprop like a King Air, we're definitely going to cover these, and we're gonna simulate putting the masks on and doing the checklist items for that. You can find more about pressurized aircraft in the Pilot Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, Chapter 7. I've got a link right there. So you can go through pressurization systems and oxygen systems. All right, we are on to Area of Operation 9, which are emergency procedures. The first task here is emergency descent. We have 6 skills with this. Skill 1, clear the area. Skill 2, establish and maintain appropriate airspeed and configuration appropriate to the scenario specified by the evaluator as covered in the POH for the emergency descent. Skill 3, maintain orientation, divide attention appropriately, and plan and execute a smooth recovery. Skill 4, use bank angle between 30 degrees and 45 degrees to maintain positive load factor during the descent. Skill 5, maintain appropriate airspeed plus 0 minus 10 knots and level off specified altitude plus or minus 100 feet and complete the appropriate checklist. Skill 6. You can find out more about the emergency descent in the Airplane Flying Handbook, Chapter 18. That covers all emergency procedures. Well, not all of them, but majority for single engine. So that's our emergency descent. This is usually going to be combined with some sort of malfunction. So I'll give you some sort of malfunction that's going to cause you to do an emergency descent. So again, this is going to be usually in a scenario-based format. I'm not just going to say, hey, perform an emergency descent. I'm going to give you some sort of malfunction or condition that would the appropriate ADM would lead you to do an emergency descent. Task B, emergency approach and landing. Simulated airplane single engine land or single engine sea. So this is just for single engine aircraft, and we're going to talk about that on this because we're focused on the single today. This has 6 skills. Skill 1, establish and maintain recommended best glide plus or minus 10 knots. Configure the airplane in accordance with the POH. Skill 3, select suitable landing area considering altitude, wind, terrain, obstacles, and available glide distance. Skill 4, plan and follow a flight path to the selected landing area considering altitude, wind, terrain, and obstructions. Skill 5, prepare for landing as specified by the evaluator. And Skill 6, complete the appropriate checklist. Again, the emergency approach and landing, remember back when we were doing the steep spiral might end with an emergency approach and landing. In fact, we might do all of those skills. In other words, we might do an emergency descent to a steep spiral to an emergency approach and landing. Those 3 could be combined into one task if we have an appropriate altitude at the beginning of that. Some examiners may do that. Some examiners may do them as individual maneuvers. It's really up to the examiner, but that's an example of how I might choose to examine those 3 things together. Systems, equipment, and malfunction. This is task C, and it has 2 skills. Determine the appropriate action for simulated emergencies specified by the evaluator from at least 3 of the elements or sub-elements listed in K1 through K5 above, and complete the appropriate checklist. So this task, I start evaluating really in the pre-flight. So just me as an examiner on the pre-flight, I ask some questions. Once you're done with the pre-flight, I'll bring you to the front of the airplane and I'll point and I'll say, hey, what is this and what happens if it fails? So what I'm doing there is I'm completing Area of Operation 9, Task C, which is systems, equipment, and malfunctions. I'll do at least 2 of those on the ground, and we'll do at least 1 in the plane. So and that'll usually be engine related because I want you to do a power off landing somewhere or simulate doing a power off landing somewhere. So we're gonna do some of these on the ground and some of them in the flight. And that's just me as an examiner. Other examiners might do all 3 in flight. But this is one of the few examples where we have a skill that's telling us to go back to the knowledge topics, and we have to sample 3 of the knowledge topics listed. This was common in Area of Operation 1, which is when we were doing our oral. So back on the first episode of the commercial, we saw this a couple times, both I think in the weather and the systems. So now this is a systems, equipment, and malfunction. So this is happening again here. Task D, emergency equipment and survival gear. We have 2 skills here. Identify appropriate equipment and personal gear. Skill 2, brief passengers on proper use of onboard emergency equipment and survival gear. So if your plane has survival gear on it, a lot of times it might just be a first aid kit and a fire extinguisher. Just showing the passengers where they're at, how to use those, make sure that they're familiar. Your airplane might not be equipped with any survival gear. So in that case, briefing the passengers on how to get out of the door in the case that you're incapacitated, that would be kind of the baseline. Wouldn't really call it survival gear, but the seatbelt is kind of part of that survival gear. So how do you use your seatbelt and get out of the plane? That's kind of the baseline there. And then maybe a discussion on the ELT. Yeah, there's that yellow box back there that's our beacon that's going to tell people where we're at. Or there might be a switch on the panel, whatever you choose to do there, but just making sure you're familiar with that survival gear on the airplane. All right, task E is for multi-engine only, as is F, G, and then we're on to area of operation 10, which is multi-engine procedures. We're going to skip through those, and we're going to go to, so we skipped over area of operation 10, and we're going to area of operation 11, which is post-flight procedures. Task A, after landing and parking, securing the aircraft. We have 5 skills here. Skill 1, utilize runway incursion avoidance procedures. Skill 2, park in appropriate area, considering safety of nearby persons or property. Skill 3, complete the appropriate checklist. Skill 4, conduct post-flight inspection and document discrepancies and servicing requirements, if any. Skill 5, secure the airplane. You can find out more about this in the Airplane Flying Handbook Chapter 2, which I have linked right here. So it's at the end of Chapter 2, because this is at the end of your ground operations. Kind of your first ground operations is your pre-flight and taxi. And then at the end of that, we can see back here a few pages is our parking, engine shutdown, post-flight procedures there for area of operation 11. And then task B here is seaplane post-landing procedures. This is only appropriate for single-engine C and multi-engine C. And that brings us to a conclusion. So really we only have one task in task 11. All right. We're right at kind of my time mark there. We successfully completed all 11 areas of the commercial airman certification standards. What I'm going to do next, there'll probably be an episode here, hopefully in the next few days that I'll release. We're going to cover kind of admin stuff and maybe do some amplifying remarks on anything that I thought we needed to cover more in the commercial. But we're gonna cover that stuff, and then probably in the episode after that, I'm gonna cover the multi-engine commercial rating, which I'm really excited about because that's the check ride I probably give the most of, and I have the most experience training for the commercial multi, something I really enjoyed teaching and doing. So I'm really looking forward to that. That'll probably be a longer series. We're actually going to have our first in-flight videos for that one, so I'm excited to incorporate that. And we'll release those on podcast format. But again, if you're listening on the podcast, check out YouTube just to see what it looks like. I'd appreciate the subscribers on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast, make sure to subscribe to the podcast. Tell your friends about it. The more listeners we get, the better, and the more people I can help do well on their check ride. In the interim, or in the past few weeks, I've gotten a lot of feedback, and I apologize for not responding to each of you individually. I get a lot of emails, and like I said, this is my busy season during the summer, so I barely have time to get all the stuff that I have to get done, so sometimes that feedback response might be delayed by a few weeks. I just want to know that you are reaching me. I'm reading everything, but I'm a little slow to respond, and I apologize for that, but it is what it is. So again, thank you so much for your time. I know it's valuable, and I appreciate you listening. I hope you find the content valuable. Good luck to you on your practical test or your check ride if you have a check ride coming up. Best of luck to you, and yeah, just stay studying, and thanks again for watching or listening. See ya.